Many mystery games out there have a big problem, which is they don't feel like mysteries at all. And one of the biggest offenders, of course, is the most famous of them all, which is Clue, a game that I find extremely abstract, pretty much a magnified version of Mastermind, in which you're just checking crossing off options from a list in which you are just launching completely random accusations. There's no realism. You may win the game by accusing yourself of murder and be right, which is, I don't know why you would celebrate that. And most importantly, it is a game that does not feel like a mystery. The mental operations that you perform when playing the game do not have anything to do with solving a natural mystery, like what my mind does when I'm watching a mystery movie or reading a mystery book. Luckily enough, at least since the times of Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, classic game, there have been games that have actual substance, depth, that are mysteries in which the players have to think like detectives that are actually trying to solve the mysteries. Games that pretty much almost work as interactive fiction. We have Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, there's a traditional games that came after that, and it seems that this style of game has had a resurgence now. And there is a new game of this type, which is Deadline by WizKids. It is a game in which the players play the role of hard-boiled detectives. There are 12 cases. The cases, the narrative of the cases is conveyed through cards that you will be able to unlock in a certain like choose your own adventure kind of tree. So definitely narrative. This is a game where, as you will see, there is hand management, set collection. There are some classic game elements, but then it is really about thinking about the story, because you will win if you have understood the story, have understood what happened, if you have solved the mystery the way you would do when you're watching a mystery movie or reading a mystery novel. What is also interesting to me is that this is set in the world of the hardboils, and I really love hardboiled fiction, the classic hardboiled from the 30s and the 40s. I find it sorely underrepresented in mystery games. There was that game Gumshoe from the 80s, which also was a hardboiled game, but very ambitious, very difficult to play, very non-user friendly. Deadline is much easier to play, not necessarily meaning that the mysteries are easy. Some are easy, some are medium, some are hard, and you can choose the difficulty of the case that you want to play, but definitely much more streamlined mechanically speaking, so you don't have to worry too much about implementing the mechanics, and you can pay attention, you can devote all of your attention or most of your attention to the storyline that emerges from the cards. But let me show you more in detail how Deadline works. Each player in the game controls a different detective represented by these cards here, and each detective has a unique power and ability that can be used during the game. We have very good player rates here, and of course this is a mystery game, so we need mysteries, we need cases. There is a case book with 12 cases, and just each described here with a description of the incidents that you're investigating and with a list of the starting clues available for that case. You investigate that case, and at the end of the game you pick up the case questions where you test your understanding of what's happening and what happened. The case question will ask you, well, the case questions book will ask you what happened, who did what, why, etc., etc., etc. The exact questions will change depending on the case, but of course you're trying to answer as many as possible, demonstrating your knowledge and understanding of the situation, and the more you answer, the better your score. And finally, once you have provided your solutions, you have to check if they're right or wrong, and this is the solution book. But now, the case itself, how do we collect clues and try to figure out what happened? Well, we need to pick up one of these envelopes here that are marked. As you can see, there's one for each of the 12 cases, and each is a deck of clues, of clue cards. Let's see how this works. And I will give you no spoilers, don't worry. I guess maybe some minute school spoilers. On one side of the clue, you will have the name of the clue, which may be a person that you could talk to, could be a place, that you may visit. Those are the two most common things. You may go and talk to the beat cops, you're going to see the crime scene, the morgue, but again, the exact composition of what's available will change depending on the case. Each clue has a series of symbols printed on this side representing the resources that you need to put together to unlock that clue and to read the text on the other side. So suppose that these are the starting clues. Well, that's what we have to work with. Now, each player will receive a hand of cards from this deck. These cards are main cards or resource cards. What's here doesn't really matter, only the icons at the bottom matter in these cards. And then you have plot twist cards, which very often are negative. They will generate a negative effect, but even when they don't, they represent a challenge because they're still in your hand and they clog your hand. These are the cards that you actually need to unlock the clue. So the more these cards, more plot twists you have in your hand, the harder it gets. How does it work? Each turn there is a player that will be the lead investigator, and the lead investigator will choose one of the available clues. I'll suppose that this is one of the starting places, and the lead investigator says we should try to go to the Mystic Shop and figure out what happens there. So the lead investigator selects that as the presently active clue. Then players, one at a time, will play cards from their hand, and what they're trying to do is to line up cards so that the icons required there will be visible. The first card that is played can be absolutely any card, and of course we want to find these symbols here, so suppose I decide to play this card here. Before you play cards, you can talk to your friends and kind of like establish a plan, but you cannot give too accurate informations about what you have exactly. You have to say, well, I can help if guns are required, but you cannot tell them exactly what you have in your hand. Also, some cards have this matchbox symbol there. When one such card is played, one of these 4 tokens, the corresponding one, is flipped to the other side. When a certain number of these has been flipped to the lighted side, they can be flipped back to obtain these advantages here, like to draw extra cards or remove plot twists. But again, first player plays a card, and then the other players may add cards to that, adding to the line of symbols here at the bottom. What you do is that you may add a card that matches at least one of the symbols there and doesn't cause any non-matching symbols to be one on top of each other. So, for example, I could play this card here because the hat is matching with the hat and there is no juxtaposition or overlapping of different symbols. Then I put it there. Now we look at the line, we're already a step closer to where we need to go because we have the cigarettes, the hat, and the money available. We still need a gun. I do have this gun here. Let me see. But I can't really add that. And suppose then that somebody plays this card here. Again, we're matching that symbol there. And the blank spaces are like wild symbols, can be matched with anything. This doesn't help me directly because I already had the money which is required on my card, but it extends the line and it prevents it from dropping out. Basically, each turn you can play a card adding it to the line, or you can use your detective special ability. You can use the matches if they're available to trigger a special ability. But if you cannot do any of those things, then you have to drop out. And sometimes you may want to play a card that is not directly useful but doesn't worsen the situation either, just so that you stay in the game. And then later someone plays this card here, boom, and now we have all of the symbols that we need. We have the gun, we have going in order, we have the cigarettes, the gun, the hat, and the money. When that is the case, other matches here? No other matches that we need to flip. To the other side, we discard these cards and we get to read the clue, which I'm not gonna show you. There's simply a text that describes what happens when the detectives visit that place or talk to that person. And at the bottom of the card, there might or might not be, see I'm covering the text, don't worry, there might or might not be an indication of other clues. For example, there may be a card that at the bottom doesn't have anything here, so well, I learned something maybe, but that's it for the time being. Or that card may lead to other clues, in which case simply I look for the corresponding cards in the deck, and those cards become available, and I put them in the line of available clues. Again, still face down, because I cannot look at the text in a card until I have unlocked it using the symbols. So you have this element here, which is like a tree, a choose your own adventure narrative tree, really. What I described is what happens if you play well and you're lucky, that is, you manage to unlock the clue. It's also possible that everybody drops out, and that of course is not nearly as good, because then the clue is not available this turn, and players may try to take it next turn. But if everybody drops out, you take one of these 3 bullet tokens and you return it to the box. Once these are or have all been used, and this is like a saving, like a parachute, because they let you fail to take the clue 3 times before serious consequences apply. When these are gone and you still fail to take a clue, then you look the clue deck and you look at the number here, and you remove from the game the clue with the highest number. So between the clues that you read and the clues that you lose, at some point you'll be out of clues, and that is when you have to take the case questions and try to solve the case to the best of your understanding. Also, when you drop out, another thing that you do is that you must play a plot twist card if you have one in your hand, if you can. And some are personal, will only affect you. Some are general, they affect everybody. There's a particularly bad one, as you can see. Luckily enough, there are detective abilities that may remove them. But that is the point. When you drop out, so you cannot add to the investigation, you play a plot twist in front of you. Also, you discard your entire hand, and then you draw back to your full hand. At the end of the turn, everybody draws back to their full hand, and then you repeat the process. You continue like this, creating these sequences of symbols. Reading the text, trying to figure out what's going on, and trying to figure out where to go and investigate next, until at the end, well, you'll try your best to solve the case. And this is how you play Deadline. I'll be honest with you, as I was reading the rulebook and I saw the mechanics about chaining the symbols one off each other, I thought, Uno? Really? Why do I need a Uno type of mechanic in a mystery game? And also it seemed to me so completely different from the type of mental operation that you perform when you're reading the text and try to think about the story, the place, the characters, the alibis, etc., etc., etc. I was afraid that collecting chains, forming chains of symbols would be too distracting, and it would simply detract from the experience. Luckily enough, I was wrong on both accounts, at least in my opinion. I didn't find that element distracting because it's very fast, really. And so I was still, in the back of my mind, I was still thinking about what the character said. Why is there a contradiction? How about that item, that object that was left in that room, etc., etc., etc. So I didn't find that distracting. Most of the time I was still spent reading the clues, thinking about it, discussing the clues, going back and reading some of the previous clues, etc., etc., etc. And then, of course, there is that moment when you're playing the card game, which somehow, again, I found more interesting than I expected. More interesting than Uno, for example, because, well, you have more flexibility. You can extend the chain in 2 directions. There are different ways in which you can interlock symbols. It turned out to be interesting. Also, I believe that the difference between Uno and that makes this game much more interesting is the fact that it is cooperative, but with limited intelligence, with limited communication. And so you get a sense of what you have, or what other players have, but then, of course, by the time you have put together the chain at the best of your possibilities, trying to solve the puzzle, it turns out they are like one symbol short. There's also another smart, back to one symbol short, because it's like, it is interesting though that frustration, of course, is aesthetically productive in a game. From that time, you need to be frustrated, otherwise there is no satisfaction in succeeding. What is also interesting in this game is the mechanism of the plot twist cards, which clog your hand and you have to get rid of them, and then when you get rid of them, of course, by playing them, they cause negative effects. There's a sort of like nice rhythm there, as you get a nice clean fresh hand of cards and you're able to succeed. Then you're replenishing part of your hand, and now you're getting some of those plot twists, but the rest of your hand is still strong and you're still able to maybe succeed in unlocking another clue, and now your hand has a lot of these cards, and finally you will fail and then you drop out and then you get a new hand. So there is that slows you down, but again, presenting a challenge in figuring out how to maximize your hand, and when you have to play a card, which one to play, try to predict what kind of effect they may have. I found those plot twist cards to present an interesting challenge. I'm not so sure that the matchboxes that turn into resources that you can use to perform actions, I'm not sure that they really add much. I didn't feel necessary. On the other hand, they didn't feel too foreign to the experience. They didn't feel like they didn't cause any negative effect. I thought, okay, that's there. I don't know, it seems like there was potential maybe there to do something else, but again, it didn't bother me. It was just like kind of like, well, I would say everything else was pretty compelling, so that was a little less compelling, but again, not a negative exactly. Deadline, I definitely enjoyed it. If you enjoy mysteries, especially of the hard-boiled style, the hard-boiled style, if you enjoy narrative games with a story, then this, of course, is a good game. It really is. Of course, the limitation is that you have 12 cases and that's it. Once you know the solution to the cases, you can't play them anymore. But you can't have it both ways. You can't have either you have Clue, you can play it infinitely because the mysteries there are not real mysteries. There isn't really an enigma to unlock. It's just a code that you're decoding. Or there is an actual story, and of course that is not infinitely replayable, just like you cannot watch the same mystery movie a million times and be, oh my gosh, amazing, who knew, who would have thunk. So that is an element that you have to deal when you enjoy this kind of fiction. It is, of course, present in Deadline 2 because it is a game that really is interactive fiction in a box. But it's interactive fiction of a good kind, very well done, well conceived, well executed. Definitely enjoyed Deadline, and 12 cases. You will have enough material there to play for quite a while. Definitely, if you enjoy mysteries and games with a story, Deadline is a game that I would recommend.